Okay.
Okay.
So let's see. One more time for those who just joined. I'm gonna be using video, not necessarily sharing a screen. So in order to keep my video front most or biggest, you can hover over my face in the little list of videos, click the three dot button, and there's pin video. And what that'll do is keep me front and center on your screen, whether you like it or not.
Cool.
And it'll become obvious why in a moment. So welcome, and just up front want to apologize that we had to cancel the previous date for this. It was a little bit hard to prepare in time for that one, so I appreciate everyone's patience. And here we are for a second go around. This is, we're going to talk about a very exciting topic. Everyone's favorite topic. I know you've been waiting and waiting and waiting to talk about URLs. I have been excited to talk about URLs. So today what we're going to do is just go through, I'm kind of going to start basic, but all along, there's kind of tips included all along. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of a demo, but I also want to encourage people to ask questions. I have my perspective on how we do our URLs here, and we try to present that to the campus as best practices, but then there are always edge cases, and the way you manage your content may be different from the way we manage ours, and that means you have different URLs. So I'm going to present to you what we know as the best way, or what we feel like is the best way, and then we can also talk about edge cases or different situations where you can't necessarily follow our recommendations. So to start really basically, oh, and one more thing I should say is normally I would have like a full-on like presentation, right? Google or Keynote or something like that. But it really hasn't been that kind of week. So I have sticky notes, and I have a lot of them, and I'm just, we'll roll with this. It's going to be a little bit different.
As long as once in a while you can just hold up a sticky note in front of the
That's what I'm going to do.
Just pass it along the camera. Like, there you
That's
go.
exactly what I'm going to do. So let's start with what is a URL. URL is a universal resource locator, and that is like a street address for your web page or your image or PDF or video. You can give it like the address for your house. You can be given to anyone, and they can find where your stuff is.
Ooh, thank you. Sorry about that.
Whether that's in the real world or whether that is on the web. So it follows along with the way we find things on the web. Most commonly, you search for them, or you click on a shared link, or you saw a link on a postcard or a billboard, and you type it into your web address or into your browser. And when you see something on a billboard or something like that, it should be memorable. And so a good URL is memorable, and it helps us find stuff, navigate, and discover things that we may not have previously known were there. And we'll get into an example of that in just a minute. But what I really want to say is good URLs are another way to browse the web. That's kind of weird the way, let's hold it like that. Okay, so good URLs are another way to browse the web. It's also a way to label your content. And what do I mean by that? So let's take an example URL. This isn't real, by the way, so don't go here. myphotos.com/weddings/June/J-and-John/sillyjump.jpg. And this is just a phony made-up URL, but think about how many things we can infer from this URL. One, this is a photo site. Two, it's probably a photo of a wedding that happened in 2018 last month, probably two people named Jay and John, and perhaps they were jumping and making silly faces while they were in this photo. So without even going here, without even knowing, having ever seen this photo, oh, and also .jpeg, you know it's a photo. So without ever seeing this image or going to this address, how many things can you infer about this piece of content? A bunch. How many things can you infer about this whole website? A lot. So a good URL, comes naturally from, well, it's so weird. I kind of cover my face. I'll cover my face. Good, maybe not my mouth. It's like captioning. Sorry, I am really punchy. I apologize. Good URLs come naturally from well-organized content. So when you have well-organized content, one, you get a good URL, but two, you have labeled your content. And why does that matter? Because well-organized content is easy for search engines to index and derive meaning from. So think about if you were doing a search for photos from Jay and John's wedding and you wanted to find that one where they were jumping. I don't know, I saw it somewhere, it was on Facebook. So you just go in and do a search and you type June 2018 Jay and John jump. And it's possible, especially in an image search, that this image would come up because the URL is well designed and the content is well organized. We'll come back to that URL a couple more times. I just want to reiterate this, that well-organized content makes for good URLs and good search engine optimization, which means good URLs are good for SEO. So another important thing about URLs is that you should consider them, just like a street address, permanent. You know, you wouldn't go to your house and be like, you know, it says 3160, but I don't like zeros, so I'm just going to call it 3164. That how many cascade? What kind of cascade of problems did that cause for like the postal service, for the delivery trucks, for almost anything? Anyone who's going to try to find your house, you can't just change the address to your house. And similarly with web content, you want to think of it as permanent. There is an asterisk there because sometimes you have to change a URL. We can get into some of the reasons why you might need to, but if you do, you want to put the right tools in place so that bookmarks don't break, search engines can find your stuff, and the search results aren't broken or affected by moving a URL. So that brings us to my first recommendation, which is to really carefully consider how to organize your content before you put it on the web so that you can avoid changes later on. And that really means sitting down and thinking. It could be as simple as like, I've got a gallery of images. And, you know, it's the first time we've ever taken all these photos of this one particular event. It's the first time it was ever happening. And so we're just going to, you know, put a folder on the website that says event name / gallery, and we're going to put all the images there. Well, what if that event's going to happen next year too? What if that event is going to happen next year and in subsequent years? So then you'd want to give that a little bit more thought, right? You'd want /the year /gallery /the images. And that way you're organizing that content in a way that it is scalable, that it can build out year over year. That's a pretty simple example. There are other, I mean, that's how things like blogs and news articles are organized. And what does that do? That infers a couple of things, right? If it's going to be an event that happens every year, maybe after 5 of those, you've got 5 years worth of content, but they're all neatly organized in year folders. What does that do? Well, that helps when people search for it. A common problem that we used to have on the UCSC website is that before we organized things in year folders for particular events, you'd have someone search for an event like Alumni Weekend. Before we called it that, it was something else. And And people would search for it, and they would find last year's or the previous year's, or in some cases 10 or 15 years ago's content, and they'd be like, I can't find, how to register for this or that. And that was because all of the pages were just kind of sitting in the top level of the website. They weren't organized into subfolders by year or anything. And so search engines were just like, well, here's the name of that thing, and here's the page I found for it, but there was no other information there to help someone understand or a search engine understand that may not be the most relevant result. So a good URL, and considering how your content is organized ahead of time, will give you, again, better SEO and search results for users. So it's important to think of things that are, when you're considering how to organize stuff, what is static evergreen content and what is accumulating related content. So what's just, your about page, that can always live at the top of the website because that's static content. It's going to change a little bit over time, maybe as your staff changes or your location changes or something like that, but mostly it's going to stay the same. Whereas accumulating content, something that happens year over year or changes on a regular basis, you want to think about how you're going to organize that so that it is in a structure where the URL, no matter how far down the line it goes, no matter how many years of content you have, or how many times it changes, the URL will always provide that reference for why things are the way they are and where they are. Because it's important to think of the web as a historical record, right? It's a record of things that have happened. It's a record of information as it existed in a particular time and space. It will change over time, and you want to have URLs that reflect that if need be. So because the web is a historical record, all of us are content librarians. So how we organize that content is really important. So now I want to talk about how we create URLs. Sort of getting into the last part here. How we create URLs. So the two most difficult things in the world are...
It's a big statement, Rob.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a huge statement. That's why I spent so much time on it. The first one is, the President of the United States learn and understand the complex geopolitical situation of the 21st century, that you can't just run around the world foaming at the mouth and tweeting nonsense and call that policy. The world is complicated. Stop resorting to bullying and toxic masculinity and learn, for God's sake. That's the first thing that's really hard. The second thing is naming things. So naming things is tough, and that's why we're here talking about URLs today. So I'm going to give you a couple of really quick philosophies for creating URLs and naming things, and then we'll go into some of the specifics of how we name them here at UCSC. So the first thing is, it's very common when you create a URL or create a slug for a page that like everything in the title goes in the URL. And you don't have to actually do that. The URL, like I said earlier, is labeling your content. It's not naming it specifically or exactly as the same title on the page. So it's typically something shorter, like a particular page name. If the title of the page is "Come to this year's big picnic event thing that'll be here on this day," all of that doesn't need to be in the URL. It would just be name of the event separated by dashes, because you're labeling your content. That brings me to recommendation number 2, which is, at UCSC we separate words in URLs with dashes. And we tend to not use underscores, so I kind of recommend not, although I know some systems just do that automatically and you don't have a choice. So if you're using a system like that, it's okay. But when you have the ability to create your own file names and they're not generated automatically, use dashes between words rather than underscores. Also, no caps. Caps just create a world of hurt because Sometimes they're considered a separate URL. So caps versus no caps. If you have the same one URL and you put caps in one of them and not caps in the other, sometimes in some browsers and some systems treat those as completely different URLs. So you create all kinds of problems for yourself and others if you use capital letters in a URL. So I just really recommend don't doing it, or not doing it, sorry. And then last but not least, no %20. %20 is how browsers is what browsers use to represent a space character. So for us, a space is just blank space, but the browser represents it with this code called a %20. And sometimes some browsers are cool with the space and they don't show %20. Other times a browser will encode it as %20. So it can actually do the same thing as caps, create a completely separate URL or create a broken URL if you have a space in your URL. So you don't want to do that if you can avoid it. So I'm going to hold these two up for another second. If I get this in the right order. 1, 2, 1, 2. Sure, let's do it like this. So 1, being carefully consider how to organize content. So you don't have to change things later on or do redirects. And then 2, when you're actually naming things, dashes before underscores, no caps, and keep spaces out of the file name. That back, this back. And my lights went out. Oh my God. Okay. So now let's do a demo. And now I'm going to share my screen. Thanks for bearing with me through all of that.
That's the first presentation I've been to that's been done in Post-it notes, and I have to say I kind of like it. I think there should be more drawings, though. Like maybe we could do some graphics in there next time, Rob.
Well, okay, so I've got one happy face, and I tried to limit it to 1. Oh, I tried to limit it to 1, but actually I've got 3, and a sad face. But I was trying to keep it limited, so. Yeah, and then I did decorate this too.
That's true.
But next time, okay. Noted. Next time, more drawings. I'm going to share my screen now. And let's talk about some URLs. Okay, let me just change the size of this. All right, so I'm on our news site, and this is a pretty straightforward example of URL design, right? Where we have chronologically ordered news articles. And what we do is we order them by year and into month folders. Now, here's an interesting thing about navigating the web. I perhaps go back further than most people and how long I've been using the web. And I've always been used to just being able to go backwards in a folder and get the logical content from that URL. So what is this? This is an archive of news from the month of July in the year of 2018. What if I go back even further? And this is kind of a guess. Oh, denied. I'm gonna have to fix that. So what would we expect here, though? You'd expect something like what we had here for July, except it would be all of 2018. And perhaps we haven't got that quite right yet, but that's what you would expect there. And so when I fix this, you would have been able to go all the way back down the folder structure to the base of the site and have logically ordered content everywhere. So I'm going to go into the news site.
So Rob, we have a question kind of as pertinent to right now. We had a question from Sarah asking, when you went back to the 2018 folder and it was broken, she asked, how would you fix that?
How would I fix that? Okay, let's look at that right now. So here I am in that news site, and I'm in the 2018 folder, and I was in the 7 July folder. And I'm just going to click on it so that it's in the main part of the screen. And the way we do that is there's sort of a convention on the, well, there is a convention on the web that an index.html page or an index.php page or anything called index is the home page for a folder. So if you just go /folder name and don't put anything else, the browser will request index. And so what we do is we put index files in each of the month folders for our news articles. And what does that do? Well, that index file is just creating an index of everything that's in the folder. It takes a minute sometimes to load because it's looking at everything that's in here and putting it on this page. So what I would do if I were fixing the 2018 folder is I would put a similar index in that folder. And what that would do was would logically show me all of the news articles for the entire year of 2018. I think what it is we may not have built that yet. So maybe I'll assign that out and have somebody build that so that our URLs are logical all the way down. So it's typical that what you do is if a folder doesn't have an index file, then that means if somebody just goes right to that folder, they're going to either get a forbidden like I did, or they'll get a 404 or something like that. And it's, you know, it breaks that idea that you can browse the web by simply modifying URLs. And again, I'm a little bit old school for being interested in that, but I do feel like it's an important paradigm of the web that you can just always remove the end of a URL all the way down to the root of the site, and you should be able to get content. And on, you know, this is something we just haven't built into this site on WCMS, but most CMSs, WordPress or Drupal or the automated CMSs, they will have that automatically.
So Sarah's follow-up question was, is building an index, adding content, and selecting an index page. So Sarah, to create an index page, you basically create a page and call it index.
Yes.
That's all you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally what you recommended. If you create a folder, the first page that you create would be the landing page or home page, and you just name that index, and that is an index page. But it can be any page type. It just has to be called index.
It's a special kind of page that gathers all the content and shows it. Most index pages are just static pages, and you put whatever you want on them. In the news site here, we built these special pages that actually run through the folder and show all of the content that's in that folder.
Right. So if you guys out there in your sites, you have your news folders and your feature profile folders and your events folders, those folders have those special index pages already. And those do exactly what Rob said. They actually display all the pages and articles that you put inside that folder. But for any other folder, it's just a regular page. So, yeah.
So I'm going to go to an individual page here, and we will look at up here at the top. I can't make that bigger, but up here at the top is the what we call the slug. It's not related to Sammy the Slug. It's just a common term for the this little chunk of information that identifies this piece of content. Because remember, this is the site here, news. This is the folder 2018. This is the folder 07 July. So this here identifies this exact page. And so how is that being identified? It's being identified as Dickens-alumnus-novel. And you can see that is it's a few of the keywords pulled out of the title here. And overall, I would say that's actually a good URL because it sort of gets to the heart of what this article is about. And this is, you know, it's not an exact science. I tend to say keep them short, but they don't have to be tiny. You should be able to, like I held up earlier in the My Photos example, you should be able to infer and have a pretty good guess about what that content is just based on the URL. And if we consider the photos example from before, in this context, it's a news article from 2018 from July that's talking about a novel, the Dickens novel by an alumnus. Let's go. I'm going to go to a different site here because I want to show you another thing that I was talking about earlier. This is our special events website. And special events are what we refer to as the ones that University Relations hosts. They're typically the campus-wide events, like Alumni Weekend and Founders, as we're going to see here. Founders used to be on its own website. It used to be founders.ucsc.edu, which now redirects here to the special events website. But one thing that happened with Founders is that it happens every year. And it's changed a little bit over the years, but it basically happens every year. And when I came on board in 2008, there had only been one. And so when they wanted the web content for 2008 on there, I said, oh yeah, just delete what's there and put up the homepage and change the homepage with the new event information. I didn't have as strong opinions about URLs at the time, but it just kind of occurred to me that maybe we should simply archive 2007 in its old folder and then put 2008 in a new folder and then update the homepage of the Founders site with the pertinent information, but keeping the historical information in the subfolder. So we started doing that, and here we are 10 years later, and almost getting ready to put up the 11th year. And thankfully, we have a couple things. We have the content organized appropriately so that if someone were to do a search for Founders and somehow end up on an older page, they could infer from the URL that that's a previous year's edition of this event. Two, as good content librarians, we have a historical record, and there are a few folks here in UR who who use this information, go back and say, who was at Founders 2009? What did we do back then? Where was the events? Or who were the folks that were speaking or the folks who were honored? We have that. We don't have to go digging through our inboxes or anything like that. It's all based here in the website. And what we're working on now, actually, this is all, in fact, let me just go Founders, it'll redirect. So this is Founders 2017. One thing that you notice is that we don't point out anywhere that there's a historical record here. So I can go to 2007. Gosh, yeah, I kind of worried it was going to do that. So it points to an old CSS file, but the content's here. Move up a couple of years to 2010. Please be better. Yes, okay. So going back to 2 website designs ago, or 1.5 website designs ago, here we have Founders from 2010. And we know who got, here are all the videos, we know who got honored, and there's even the flyer. So what we are working on is that going to work? Oh, it's not going to work. Still have to go back and fix things sometimes. What we're working on now, though, is some place on the site that says past Founders events, and so that we can provide a list of all the things that have happened. So right now, you kind of have to know that this record exists, and at some point, we'll have it on the site so that you can go there. But in 2007 and 2008, when I started, it was really just kind of a quick decision, but it turned out to be the right decision, and so it's become part of our thinking that if we're going to be doing things that even remotely might happen year over year, to just organize them into year folders. And, you know, I'm trying to think of an example where something that isn't just an event that happens year over year, or something that isn't just date-based, would work like this. I can't think of one, but I would encourage, you know, when you're considering how to organize your content, that you see if you can find some kind of organizational structure that works and that can scale year over year, or that can grow with the content on your website. Because all websites will grow in size, whether we want them to or not. And having a good organizational structure at the very beginning, good information architecture, carries you through. And then you get to someday go back and go, yeah, look what I did. Wasn't I so smart 10 years ago? Even though it was really just kind of a slapdash decision. At this point, I kind of want to throw it over to questions and comments, and any other thoughts people might have on.
So Rob, I've had a few kind of trickle in while you were talking that I'll ask first. And I think what we would do is if you guys could just chat your question into the chat, and then I'll read it out just to prevent the loud noise on all that. So the first question that we had goes back to your the URL design, avoiding capital letters. So yes. Chris says, when are examples of capital letters being new URLs? I would like to know some specific examples of that.
Okay. Let's try this. Let me go back to news. Let's go here. Surreptitious branding. Let's just change this to capital A admissions. That's a different page from the browser's perspective. And the reason why I focus on it a bit is because URLs are, you know, they're a form of currency. So I may just be happenstance talking to somebody about something and say, oh yeah, just go to founders.ucsc.edu. And if somebody thought, oh, Founders is a official event, so I will go to founders.ucsc.edu. That got switched. Okay, thank you. Good.
Redirect.
Do that. Or ucsc.edu/founders. What happens is that anytime you put a capital letter, that's actually a new, different URL. And we can all get mad at Tim Berners-Lee for making the web work like that, but I believe that's been sort of the way the web works from the very beginning. So as a general rule, I just say if it's all lowercase, then you never have to guess. And since most URLs,
we lost you, Rob.
we just load. Oops, sorry.
Here. So just another question just came in related to that was, if sites have current capitals letters in their URLs, should they go back and change them?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's a big one.
To the
the willy-nilly changing of URLs.
Yeah, changing of URLs. So let's pontificate on that for a minute. Particularly here at UCSC, we have web content that goes all the way back to 1993, and probably earlier than that. That's just the earliest stuff I've seen is 1993, and a lot of that stuff has really good search engine optimization, because one of the considerations is age, and if something's been on the web for a very long time, then it sometimes gets better SEO. As soon as you change a URL, so what happens to the old one? Well, it basically breaks. You end up with a 404. And search engine says, oh, I used to know where that was, but now I don't. And people who have bookmarked it, or it got sent in an email, that's a common one for us, it got sent in an email, something like that, now that URL is broken. I recently heard that any URL for Amazon.com, going all the way back to when they were founded in '99, still works. And one, that's amazing. And I assume that there's somebody who's like the Maytag repairman making sure URLs still work. But it also represents a philosophy that this content, that we're librarians and this content should always be found. So if you have capital letters in a URL right now and you want to change it, I would say probably you don't have to, but yeah, I'm gonna say don't, because changing and breaking a URL is worse than having caps in it, you know, because once it's gone, it's gone. And there are ways in what we do for our stuff is we put redirects in place. So we'll put out a redirect that redirects, tells the browser, this thing moved and it's over here now, and you should update your permanent record with this thing, with this new URL. That does take a little bit of effort. It's not easy. And so it's easy for us, but it's not necessarily easy for end users, for everyone. It requires, in fact, let me just pull this up now. It requires a file on the website called .htaccess. And htaccess is a file that lists, well, redirects can be listed in a couple of places, but this is one place to put it in. So you can see there's some what looks like gibberish here that is telling the browser or the server, when somebody asks for this, go here instead. It's called a redirect match. And then this is the little code that goes back to the to whoever requested it. So in search engine terminology, this basically says, this thing has been moved permanently. And if you're asking for this, you're going to get this instead.
So, and just so so those of you they don't have you guys don't have access to get into your htaccess file and code these things. So that's where we can just help you. So if there's something, you just put a ticket in and we can take care of that for you.
Yeah, and building on what Teresa said, if you do need to redirect something, you know, like an entire folder, and it comes up, give us a heads up well ahead of when you need it, because it's very common for people like, oh, I gotta redirect this right now. And if it's an entire folder, that can be kind of hard to do. We have to be thoughtful about it, because entire folders getting redirected is a big deal. And if any of this syntax is wrong, your entire website goes down. It just becomes completely unavailable, because what the server does is it looks at this file first, says, oh, somebody's asking for something. I'm going to look at this file and make sure that I don't have to send them somewhere else instead. And if there is anything wrong with this file, the server goes, whoa, couldn't read that. Hey, guess what? I'm down. And it just sends back what's called a 502 or something like that, which is a server error. And it will do that for every request. So if you have something broken in here, your site becomes completely unavailable. And that's why we don't make this file available to everyone. But in the event that you do need to change URLs, it's okay to put in a ticket and ask for it, because we can create these files and put this in here so that you don't have broken URLs.
So that brings us to the next, like a little related topic. So we had a question about kind of archiving, you know, where you have a site that has a lot of news articles that go back a lot of years, and there hasn't been any sort of like year by year kind of organizing. Should they? So the question is, should they go back and start that archiving, where you're moving things into folders and, you know, kind of reorganizing your site, which will change URLs and will break links. But so what's the recommendation for folks in that area where you have a site that's got a lot of stuff that's kind of not organized, and they want to organize it and put it into archive folders and organize it that way? What do you have to say about that? So,
boy, oh boy.
I know.
Next question. No. My preference, wow, this is kind of hard to answer, but here's what I can say about that is, if going back to the My Photos example from earlier, that is an ideal URL. So understanding that you're going to be maintaining your site for years and years, or for a long time, or you'll be maintaining it for a while, but someone will come after you and they'll need to understand how the site is organized. I would say it is a good idea, no matter how much content you have, no matter how long it's been accumulating on the site, to think about organizing it, have a plan for organizing it, and then contact us and ask, I need to move all this stuff. I haven't moved it yet. Here are my thoughts on how I will move it. Is there any way to make sure that these old links don't break? And a lot of times we can come up with something. This syntax here that I'm showing you in the htaccess file, it allows for things like entire folders to be redirected. So anything that's inside of a folder, if you change the folder name later or you put it somewhere else, oftentimes we can redirect from one folder, one location on the site to another location on the site, and everything inside of it gets redirected to automatically. So there are tools for that. So I guess that means my recommendation is it's okay to reorganize, because the organization is the most important. Because if you organize 50 pages today into good year or some kind of organization in folders, 5 years from now, you do have to put redirects in place, but 5 years from now, everyone just automatically knows where everything is. And you get that, like I was doing earlier, you get that ability to go slicing off pieces of the URL and get to different parts of the site. So that's my recommendation. Long-winded, but I hope that made sense.
Well, so there was a follow-up question kind of to that. Just says that, so Daphne, you might need to clarify when you say archive. So the question was, archiving all that information causes a lot of, quote, stale content on a page, and doesn't that reduce the site's search engine optimization? So Daphne, did you mean kind of organizing it but keeping it published, or archiving it meaning you're taking it away?
Yeah.
So
that's a good.
So Daphne was thinking kind of how you organize the founders events.
Okay. Yeah. So for historical things like events and stuff, I do tend to want to keep that stuff around, even though it's sometimes people don't understand why. It has proven very helpful to have it. It's a record, right? It's the Library of I was going to say Congress, but no, Library of Content. It's the Library of Content. So yeah, you can, once you get it into your folders, someone who finds it just glances at that URL and they know it's from the past. I did want to go back to stale content though, because the other opportunity that you have when you reorganize something is to really consider whether it does need to be on the web, right? Because for as much as everything it's a historical record, sometimes it can go away. I don't want to say that everything that's ever been on the web needs to stay there. I feel like a lot of it should, but not all of it. And so sometimes that's an opportunity to really think about something and say, I'm trying to think of an example we've had. I think we still have a page on the website that was about the swine flu in 2009 or 8 or 10 or something like that. But there was the swine flu, and of course, because it was a topic of cultural discussion and everyone was afraid of it and it was going to knock on your door and kill you, we ended up building a page on the website that I believe, God, should I do this? I'm just going to do this. Let's go to ucsc.edu/flu. Work. It works. All right, so it's still here. This is a page, and this is an example of a page that will probably go away in the next iteration of the website. Even though it is a very rich historical record.
That is just too funny.
Of a single flu and everything we did about that flu. Can't believe this. I was expecting it to be.
It's like almost daily, and sometimes like every other day.
I don't know if anybody on this call remembers Jim Burns, but this is a classic Jim Burns creation. And if Jim's on the call, I love you, Jim, but this was crazy. We did need to message this stuff, and rather than do it on the news site, we kind of accumulated it here on this page. And should it still be here? It's arguable. It is part of the historical record. I don't know that it needs to be here. It's sort of just kind of basic stuff. Here you can go to a clinic. Here's how to get a shot, that kind of thing. This might not be information that we would keep on the web long term. So it's one example.
Well, you also want to think about, I mean, this is my opinion, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but think about what you would want to be discoverable via Google. So like if you've got, let's say a policy posted that was valid in, 2014, and you guys made a page and then you PDF'd it or something and all of that, and then that was on the web. And then you've since had multiple iterations of actual current real policy or thing on the web. When people Google things, if you've got that old content on there, and there could be a potential confusion, like, oh, I found this policy document, and maybe they didn't look at the date, that sort of thing. So I think that's what I think about. Like, what do I want something? Is it okay for Google to find it and discover it?
Yeah.
So because Google will, if it's still published and indexed and out there, Google's gonna potentially get to it. So that's a way to know, like, oh, maybe this shouldn't be still published on the web. Maybe, I should archive that, tuck it away, or delete it.
That's a good example. And I'll actually show you a place where we're not creating a historical record, and I kind of think we should be. Administration org chart. So the campus org chart, this is the highest level campus org chart, is a PDF file. And every time there's a change, we go into WCMS, but we overwrite the existing file. And what are we doing when we do that? We're kind of losing the historical record of the organization of the campus. Now, I'm sure it exists somewhere else, but it seems like we should probably be just building that into our process here so that you could always go back in time and see who was, the leader in leadership at UC Santa Cruz at a particular time. We date the bottom here so the last time we updated this one, but this one is the only one available. So it's an example of somewhere where we're not creating that historical record, but we probably could be. And then we would organize those into probably into some kind of date-based or version subfolder system. I'm not totally sure how we would do that, but it'd be something that we would think about and consider in order to provide that past record for people who wanted to see it.
So another question related to going back to your, it says when removing content like that flu page that you were talking about, do you ever contact university archives to see if they want to save it? And that's a great question about how our content's kind of saved and captured.
Yes, we do. I'd have to, Sue from the library, I'd have to talk with her about what they do, but I believe, so what we would typically do if we're taking something down, we'll ask, if University Archives wants something like that. We wouldn't, like, for that flu page is a great example, we wouldn't take that down before asking, hey, do you want this? Otherwise, we're just gonna delete it from the web.
Do you think that folks should be doing that prior to deleting their content? Or do you think that they, like if there's something that you want to have them use their judgment as far as like, this has historical value content, let's make sure that it's archived in our system somewhere, versus this is out of date and it can be deleted? Like, how to... Yeah, I know, right? Because we don't want these sites to have 45,000 pages because people were afraid to delete things. But we also
You know, it's interesting. I think I'd have to check in with Sue from the library and see what the Wayback Machine is already, what the Internet Archive is already pulling in from the
Yeah, because
site.
I think it's an automatic. I think it just
Yeah,
grabs, doesn't it? Yeah. So
I think so. I might go into the Internet Archive and say, is this here? If it's there, then okay, cool. Maybe it doesn't need to be on our website anymore. Another thing, another conversation that we're having right now with other groups on campus is what needs to be public versus what can just be on an intranet or some kind of a Google site that's locked down to only your team or something like that. Those are all they're tough questions and they're specific to your different business needs and business roles. And it could be that can just be deleted and go off into the ether and you can have a drink. Or it could be that it needs to go to digital archives, or it could be that it is something that can come off the public web and go into some kind of internet for your team. It's tough to know. I can't really give a one size fits all recommendation for that. But we're happy to help you think it through.
yeah. Angela, your comment mentions the Wayback Machine. Do you happen to know if that's done automatically? Let's see if if she's still on the line.
I'll unmute.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So unfortunately it's not perfect. It does seem like the more that the site is trafficked, that the more it is crawled, but it's definitely saved us. We've had, a professor come to us and say, oh, a graduate student site, went down when the campus deleted their account, but we were able, because we had the URL, we were able to actually find a version of it. So it's, it's not perfect, but it is a tool.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that's at archive.org.
Mm-hmm. It makes me want to check the Flu page, but I'll do that later. The last thing, and we can continue to take questions, but the last thing I wanted to show, although I can't find an example of it, is something just completely non sequitur about URLs. Is it some news outlets, and this is why URLs are fun. Some news outlets have taken to putting a punchline in their URL. So the headline for the article, we'll just throw out a hypothetical, say the president tweeted something inappropriate. Not like that would ever happen. But let's just say that happened, and Washington Post puts up a correction or something powerful. The title will say, tweet falsely claims blah, blah, blah. And then in the URL, the slug will say, oh my God, he did it again, .html or whatever. So it's, I've seen it on BuzzFeed. I've actually seen it on the New York Times. I can't remember the article. I'll try to find it. And I've seen it on the Washington Post. But it's always fun to have one of those articles and glance up at the URL and see like some kind of punchline or joke up there. So that's newer. I've never seen that before November 2016. But it's it's entertaining. You're like, oh, okay, they have to report this thing, but they totally understand. So something to keep an eye out for, and I'll try to find an example. I was looking for one before we started, but I couldn't find it. And there was one in the New York Times recently that was actually pretty good. So URLs can be fun too. That's why we need to take care of them. And I forget what else. Well, I guess the other thing on the agenda today is to see some show and tell. Teresa, or did we not?
Yeah, nobody kind of, volunteered for that. So until someone volunteers, or if you guys are, if you have a last minute, like, hey, this is pretty cool that we did, that's great. We can just do Q&A. If you guys have any other, it doesn't, if you have Q&A, it doesn't have to be very, it's okay with you, Rob, specific to actually what we talked about today. But if there's any kind of burning web questions that you have, we have time. So
yeah, come at me.
Let's do it. Bring it.
Talk web stuff.
Right. So, and we'll just have awkward silence until somebody chimes in.
I know, completely quiet. I was trying to think if we have other things we can chat about. It's summertime, so it's a little quiet. We are, just a real quick update, we are working on the second phase redesign of the campus website. I don't have any visuals to show yet. We're still working on the planning phase, but that is underway, and that's going on. Let's see, what was I going to say? Oh, the campus events calendar is coming also this summer, a little bit later, probably in August. And little side note, it actually uses underscores when it creates URLs. And we actually kind of begged them to change that, but it's a vendor product and it's configured a certain way and it's vendor hosted, so we weren't able to. So events on the new events calendar will have longer URLs, and they will be, the words will be spaced with underscores. And every time I see it, a little piece of me goes, oh, okay.
So we have, yeah, so we have two people wanting to show and tell. First one's Detmar and Chandler, staff HR. They wanted to show a, so maybe one of you guys want to do it, just unmute and just give us a little, you know, little blurb about what you want to share.
Yeah, we went from employment to talent acquisition when we had leadership change, and it is very big with their brand and their new philosophy, but it was employment as a folder for the longest time. So I can go ahead and go through all of our own links to make sure that we keep everything consistent and don't break anything. But we updated the 404 page as well to let folks know if you are looking for a resource, you might look at our talent acquisition section or just replace the word employment for talent acquisition. And that could help.
So you edited your not found page?
Yes.
To kind of explain what you did.
Right. And then now I just found out we could have asked for that folder to be redirected as well. So look for a ticket in your inbox soon.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So employment just became talent-acquisition. Is that correct?
Yeah, but that was at the beginning of the year because I wanted to pick a time that would be a little bit less trafficked.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that would have been, that's a good example of something where we can redirect all requests to a specific folder, including subfolders and subpages within that folder, and have them seamlessly go to the other URL. I was just looking to see if you have a htaccess file.
So so while you check that, Rob, I'm just gonna, so I don't know if all of you guys know this, but you have a page you have access to in your site called Not Found, and that has some, so if you go in there you can actually edit it, but it actually has some standard, like, we're sorry, this, you know, the standard page not found text, but you can personalize that and you can add content or change the wording if you need to. And sometimes I've seen this happen where folks, kind of like what Staff HR did, where they have a little bit of a reorganization, kind of did a little, you know, thing, and rather than redirect all these things throughout the site, they basically realized they were going to break links, so they put a little blurb on there that says something to the effect of, we've recently re-architected our website and the link you're looking for no longer exists. You know, these are some top level things you might be searching for, kind of some things on the site, and then there's a little search bar for people to actually search, like for
I can show you if you want. I can share screen.
Yeah, share screen. Let's see what, I mean, so that's just in case you guys were wondering, that 404 page, that's Not Found, and you can add content and edit that. You know, don't get crazy, but you know, you can.
Yeah, so when you have a specific one in there, you called it out. That's a good idea, and you dated the information.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it back to you now.
Okay. Yes, and then let's see. And let's see. Oh, and then the next, we have a show and tell from Stephanie Sawyer. Hi, Stephanie. So if you want to, unmute yourself and if you have something to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been getting a little creative with the new campus directory page types in the WCMS and thinking about how can we creatively communicate information to our students, prospective and current, about our faculty and what they do. And there's a lot of different ways in which someone might approach the exploration of faculty, whether it be by their professional research interest, their teaching interest, their engagement in the undergraduate program or the graduate program. I could go on. So we've been, for lack of a better word, I would say hacking some of the directory page types to compile a variety of different information. And let's see here, how do I share my screen?
At the bottom, there's a little green arrow if you kind of hover over your window in the Zoom.
Perfect. So let me see. So I'll share this. Okay. So what we've done is we've taken some of the faculty directory page types, particularly the ones where we can enter the faculty cruise ID and display their information. And we've included information relevant to specific populations of students. So our major is broken down into what we call regions of concentration. And we've found it's been difficult to convey information about those individual regions while talking about the major as a whole. It just gets too long, too much information, too confusing. So we've broken them out into these sub-pages. This is the Asia and the Pacific concentration, for example. We include information about the major requirements, but then you'll see down here at the bottom is where we've been able to then pull in that campus directory information for the individual faculty that are affiliated with those concentrations. We do, of course, still have our regular faculty directory page that's affiliated by Alpha. We also have a directory page by their specific research specialization. And then we also have that
love this
by the concentrations. But what we found was, students weren't always, despite however many embedded links that we were putting into the specific major pages, the students weren't always getting from the undergraduate section into the faculty section to find information about who their mentors are going to be, or how to get more information about getting involved in research relative to their specific areas of interest. So we've made them we think, pretty easy to find. They're all within the parent major requirements folder, so the students can go and look up information that's going to be helpful and very specific to them. So it's kind of a way of calling that out. So we're kind of excited about this, and we're going to see how this goes. Another thing which I'm really excited about, and we just published yesterday, is we now have, we've always had this, it's called the Catalog of Course Requirements. Those of you that work in undergraduate programs know that there isn't really a great way to communicate to students outside of the student portal. If you're lucky enough to have an academic advisement report, there isn't really a great way to communicate to the students how their courses might apply to specific requirements. So we'd had this static page with just like tons and tons of information on it to try and help our students better understand their degree requirements. But with the generous support of the development team, and Rob, I think you signed off on this. Thank you. We've added some JavaScript to this page, so now we can actually filter this information. So students who are like, oh, I really want to take a class with Alan Christie, and I want it to satisfy a cross-cultural requirement, can do searches and find curricular information that's going to help them make better and more informed decisions about how to satisfy the degree requirements. So
this is awesome. How does it work in mobile by chance? Does it truncate pretty well?
I think it truncates pretty well. I checked it out a little while ago. I didn't see any problems with it. Hopefully as the curriculum management project progresses, we'll get something that's maybe a little bit more sustainable. This is dependent upon JavaScript from what I am told. So I'm hoping that eventually we'll have something that feeds directly from AIS. But in the interim, this is going to provide our students with something that helps them better understand the curriculum and how it aligns with their degree requirements.
Absolutely. If something like this could also be done for the directory, that would be leaps and bounds as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Stephanie, you have a question from Rachel, and it says, any way you can update that with the courses that are actually offered?
You mean do it by year?
I'm not sure, Rachel. Yes, that's what she says. Yes.
Yeah, I could. This was sort of a first step just to kind of get everything cataloged. Theoretically, I could do this by year. Just these are the classes that are being offered annually. To be honest, this is a lot of manual work. It's a lot of HTML coding that has to be done. So it is kind of labor intensive. I'm going to see how this goes, and also again see where things are at with initiatives that you, Teresa, and you, Rob, and others in the WCMS team do before I kind of go down that road. I'm hoping that you all will have a solution
Yeah.
before I have to maintain that kind of page on an annual basis, because it is a lot of work. So this will hopefully be more or less static moving forward and won't need a lot of maintenance.
That's cool.
Yeah, I could see that being a bottleneck in a lot of departments.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my colleagues publish this information via a PDF that they printed and then scanned and then uploaded, So it is a table, which isn't the greatest, but as of now, this is the best way we have to kind of convey this very complex information. Because it's not entered in AIS, so we can't feed it if we want it to anyway. So we're hoping that the curriculum management project, as it moves along, will help with some of this stuff. So this is we feel, a great interim solution.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Anybody else? We have a little bit of time. It's okay if it's a no. Nope, can end early.
I'll give you 15 minutes back.
Yeah. Going once, going twice. All right, guys. So thanks for, this is our summer web user group. We'll come up with a date in the fall, probably later in the fall quarter.
Yeah.
Give you guys some time in September and early October to breathe. So thanks. And then this is recorded, so Rob's going to turn it into an actual video that can be shared out, and then we'll send it all out to all y'all. So
yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys.